very difficult. And then when I got one, it wasn't what I thought it would be. And from that, in my roles as a leader, I have always mentored people in the correct manner, to the point where I now have
a lot of conferences. I do a lot of reading of scientific journals as they relate to the work I'm doing now. But I also do networking. There's some science networking groups, particularly for scientists of color. So in terms of keeping informed about the trends, but also other,
Okay, welcome to my Adnor Docs Woman History Month series of conversations with immigrant women. And we've been asked to continue this conversation beyond Women's History Month, so we'll see how it goes. The military people would like us to do it during Military Awareness Month, and I'm thinking of doing that again. But I would like you to introduce yourselves, and Vanessa, we can start with you, followed by Ingrid. Just give us the short version of your immigrant journey, and we'll get more into it with the questions. So Vanessa, you can go ahead.
Okay, my name is Vanessa Boyce. I am in Silver Spring, Maryland currently. I left my warm country and moved to Steubenville, Ohio in January of 1990. I recommend everybody to move when the weather is warm. I've been in this country for quite some time, where I did my undergrad, master's, and doctoral degrees, all in biology, and actually my doctorate degrees in neuroscience. And what else you want to say? Okay, that's it.
Okay, Ingrid.
I am Ingrid Berment. I'm an immigrant. I live currently in St. Albans in England, and my journey started in 1998. I first came as a working holiday maker, and I did just that. I worked and I made some holidays. And then I really enjoyed being at that time I was in London. And then I enjoyed being here. And so I followed the process to then apply for citizenship. I studied my first degree in human resources, which is because I landed in a job in personnel, as it was called at the time. And then I did a subsequent, it's called the MCIPD, which is the equivalent of a master's, but it's just another level of human resources that is recognized, like the ACCA, it's quite like the accounting recognition. So yeah, and that's where I am. I'm a human resources consultant, mainly to the National Health Service in the United Kingdom.
Okay, thank you, ladies. So one question that you both had in common, and I need to get this part. Give me 1 second.
All right, good.
So, ladies, what was some of the biggest challenges you faced as an immigrant when building your career, and how did you overcome them? Ingrid, you can start us off.
I think it was, and please take this, as you might. Growing up in Trinidad, I don't think I was aware that I was Black and Black and Black. So that was never a real thing, in getting jobs. I had my first job when I literally walked out of school and walked into a job and walked out of that one into another one. And I was picking and choosing without a qualification. And I think coming to the UK, I realized that, I was different. and I'll be honest with you, it really only clocked much later on that, it was because I was Black. I am Black. So I don't, and the thing is, whilst I say that it only clocked on much later, was because I think maybe because I came when I was young, and because I came if you go back to what I said about my journey, I was here on a working holiday visa, so I was literally having fun, and then I fell into a job, and that's when I really started going, okay, well, I'm in personnel, I'd like to do this more, and then I studied. So I went to school and I studied part-time, and it really felt still like a whole big ball game. So it was a lot of fun. I was living in a house full of Trinidadians, a lot of them from, if you know Trinidad, from the west side. So, maybe privilege would be the word we would use now. So overcoming it was really when I think I moved out of the house and I was now on my own, and the degree's finished, and I'm really focusing on getting a career, making a career out of human resources rather than just doing a job in personnel to get the next money, to get the money to go to the next party. And in overcoming that, I think I talked to my colleagues who were like me and really just pushed through the ignorance that I think I felt at the time, really in a space of, you know, I, in a childish, real, I don't even know what to call it. It was really like, well, oh, I didn't know. Oops, I didn't realize. Oops. And I have to say that is the only way I got through, by literally either ignoring and just keeping to my agenda, which was to be able to be in a position to, if I were to be, to have a mother, to provide stability, to have my own house, to have, the things that, we need as humans to survive. And yeah, that propelled me into the space that I am in now. And I guess I'm comfortable with it, but it really was from a place of ignorance to begin. And yeah, kept with the ignorance, and it seemed to work.
Okay, Vanessa, what were some of the challenges you faced as an immigrant and when building your career, and how did you overcome them?
So I started off, so I came as a student on a student visa. I did all my secondary education here. And I did not appreciate how limiting the visa situation can be. So I had a student visa, and with a student visa, you can study. And maybe you could work on campus. But, as Ingrid said, you have to eat, right? And feed yourself and make somebody. And so trying to balance paying tuition, studying, getting little jobs on campus. We couldn't do anything off campus. And what the jobs that were available to students, well, immigrant students, really, because the American students could work anywhere. Were limiting to location, but also to the amount you'd make. So that was a challenge, just even trying to make ends meet as a student. And as I went from my undergraduate degree to my graduate degree, different visas were required and applied to the different situations, but they were still very limiting. There was very, very little you could do from starting off as a student visa, going then to a different type of student visa. And even when I became a resident, it was still limiting in terms of the jobs that you could apply for or could not apply for. So, it was very constrained and frustrating in many ways, trying to navigate, okay, well, this is what I want to do, but this is what I can do based on the visa that I have.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one aspect. And certainly what Ingrid mentioned about, I wasn't Black when I left Trinidad, I was a Trini,
Yeah.
And so that was a big, that was a real, they talk about culture shock. That was a real shock for me. There were I had people asking me in undergrad, and even when I did my graduate degrees years later, if we have cars in Trinidad, do we live in houses? And it's like some real ignorance. And so they see you as lesser, right? They don't even have house. They don't even think we have houses, So we were seen as a lesser person off the bat by virtue of being an immigrant. But certainly, the whole experience was just, I had to learn I had to figure out how to get to where I wanted to be with the limitations that I was given, right? It's not like anybody moves to a country and say, okay, well, this is what I don't, I want to do this, but I'll put all these obstacles in my own way, right? Trying to navigate that was something that nobody is taught when they leave their country and move to another one. Those were the challenges.
I can definitely relate to all, and I've experienced practically everything that was mentioned thus far. So, Vanessa, to stick with you for a moment, what role has language proficiency played in your career development, and how have you or have you had to improve your language skills over time?
Yeah. To the latter question, because and from coming from Trinidad, we speak with a certain rhythm. We use there's certain things that we say that Trinidadians would understand that Americans do not. A simple thing I told somebody about a maxi taxi. So I said, oh, I took a maxi to somewhere, and they were completely confused, and I had to explain that what a maxi was to us was, and and this was actually to somebody else from the Caribbean, so an immigrant from another Caribbean island. But then talking to Americans, I had to slow down and enunciate and be very deliberate about what I was saying. I tried not to adopt an American accent, but I still know that when I go back to Trinidad, I know I speak differently, right? But being able to I would say not to frighten the natives, because when they hear too much of an accent, they well, as I mentioned before, they view you differently, right? But then they use it as an excuse, in my opinion, to say that they don't understand what you're saying, or or to interpret differently what you are saying. So I had to try to. I not had to try. I tried, and I made a really serious effort about making sure that I was heard.
Got it. So, Ingrid, you can address this as well in terms of the language proficiency, but I would like to know in terms of your cultural identity. How have you integrated your cultural identity into your professional brand, and how do you communicate your potential to employers or clients?
Yeah. I think what I've learned, and maybe if I stick to that point of the ignorance, is to be my authentic self. So my brand, and as a consultant, I work with many different, trusts, NHS trusts, which is many different hospitals. And what I find in being able to land that contract, I have been nothing but myself. So exactly as, was mentioned before, I didn't change my accent. I articulate better, but I think what in terms of maintaining my brand and and being my true self, it really was about just believing that I'm here to do it, and I know I've got the skills. If you want those skills, you just trust through that process of negotiation or interview or whichever it is, and you take it or leave it. I have not gone and forced myself into a situation where I think it would have worked detrimentally against me, and the no's that I might have had along the way have been really useful. So I think that language part of the question as well, though. What's interesting here, I found, was that we in the Caribbean had been significantly higher educated in terms of learning the right way to write a sentence, how to form a sentence with a grammar and all the rest. And that was a shock for me, because I thought here I was coming to the motherland, and I'd have to do so much more. And what I felt was I had to actually do a little bit less to be able to fit in, because the one thing that was pointed out to me a lot was, "You so articulate." And I guess that was their way again of trying to push us in that box or push me down. But I was like, yeah, no, I know, because they actually do not speak the way we were taught to speak in the Caribbean. So, yeah.
So that's pretty interesting.
Really
Vanessa,
interesting.
how have you integrated your cultural identity into your professional brand? And how do you communicate this to potential employers, clients, or even students?
That's a good question because I have not really, because I what I found is, um, let me take that apart. So to students, yes, I kind of say, well, and particularly depending on the audience. So my enthusiasm is around STEM and increasing representation and outreach to underrepresented groups in science, which include all the brown people and women, right? So, when I'm speaking to that audience, that information about my background and et cetera is important and pertinent. Otherwise, it's a liability, unfortunately, So, you can hear from my accent that I am not an American. You can see from my face that I'm not Caucasian, mainstream. And I'm in a science field that is predominantly white male dominated, right? I think the only benefit that I get from in those areas, it depends on, it will depend on the individual that I come across in terms of their open-mindedness. But in terms of my, as Ingrid said, right, we're raised differently in the Trinidad, in Trinidad and potentially in the rest of the Caribbean. I am here, right? So you go into a room and you are present in the space. So I'm not trying to be diminutive, right? So that I think has benefited me, right? In terms of being bold-faced, if you want to call it that way. I go into the room and you will hear what I have to say. But the bringing in my cultural identity, I do not in certain areas because it tends to be taken as a way of disregarding my my potential contributions to a discussion.
Oh, interesting. So, what do you think employers can do to create a more inclusive and supportive work environment for immigrant professionals, Vanessa? And what changes have you seen in recent years? Because we've all been in these various places for over 2 decades, so there must have been some changes in one direction or another. So what do you think employers can do today to create a more inclusive and supportive workplace environment? And what changes have you seen in recent years?
I have seen, well, there's quite a push for diversity and inclusion here in the States. So working backwards, I think now they have recognized that there needs to be more diversity, and by diversity, I don't just mean in terms of color, in terms of gender, in terms of experience, in terms of educational background, because it brings a lot to a discussion when you have different people in a room thinking about the same thing, and from bringing their diverse backgrounds into that conversation. So those efforts I've seen increase more in the last maybe 3 years, really 3 or 4.
After George Floyd, we had that push for diversity and inclusion, which
Yes.
hit the States. And unfortunately, in the last month, I kept reading about people who have either lost those diversity and inclusion roles, the DEI roles, or the departments being eliminated altogether. So I'm finding it very interesting that it was very reactive to that situation, and now we're in the process of rolling it back. But Ingrid, how have you integrated your cultural identity into your professional brand? Oh, I'm sorry. I will be eliminating that from the... The question is, what do you think employers can do to create a more inclusive and supportive workplace environment for immigrant professionals? And what changes have you seen where you are in recent years?
Well, this one touches my every single fiber of my being because this is my business. My business is people. And so I'm in there telling people about those benefits, about embracing people as their true, authentic selves, and about recognizing everybody's faith, everybody's differences, everybody's, religion, race, creed, color. Maybe it's that what you call it, national anthem that we grew up in that is just in my brain. So this is what I talk about. If somebody just hires me to write a policy, I throw in about, about diversity in every single policy, and hoping that the policy is able to speak to as many people as possible. The other thing is, what changes I've seen, unfortunately, just the other day I was saying this, that when I came on board, I came here as an immigrant. I was the one in every organization, the one. And it was really kind of, it was strange because I didn't feel like, I know that especially that the United Kingdom has a lot of minorities, but why weren't they working in the normal jobs? I'd see one in an office, which was me, but then I'd see a million in KFC, and I'd see hundreds in McDonald's, and I'll see all of them cleaning the streets and driving the buses. And so I think what has happened over time is that we ourselves have realized, well, wait a minute, we could get those jobs. And so we've put ourselves out there. So the integration here has been a lot more. Everybody will tell you that they have an agenda. But what I have seen in the last 5 years or so is a revert to it back to where it was when I began. Because for whatever reason, they excuse or they use that, well, we've ticked the box, 6 years ago. So, as time goes by, we'll still employ our friends or our family. So it's really in a place where, again, when I step into the organization, I am the one. And really frightening. But what I do see, I must say, in my son's generation, my son is 22, that they don't give a flying fish. They are all about, I'm not seeing color, I'm not seeing race, I'm not seeing this, I'm not seeing that. And it is, so when I look down at that generation, I'm like, they can try all they want, but your children will probably, embarrass you if you think that's an embarrassment. Yes. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that it will go right back, again in a very beautiful place. Because as I said, when I came, it was no. Then through the years, I was represented, but I am seeing that again where I am one.
Okay. So when it comes to staying up to date, just to switch gears for a minute, in your various industries, and Ingrid, I'm going to stick with you and then we'll go to Vanessa. How do you stay up to date in your industry with the trends, developments, and what resources have you found to be most helpful in your career?
Well, to stay up to date, I do what the kids do. I'm out there, I'm on TikTok watching, I'm on Instagram, I'm all the social handles I can to learn quick and snappy and to give it back to them quick and snappy. But in terms of research and staying up to date, I do heavily rely on world events. So I'm a news watcher, and I take what's going on in the news back into the workplace through, what can I say, organizations like the CIPD, which is the Chartered Institute of Professional Development, which is a human resources body. And they have so many networks that you can, whatever you're really interested in, you can, get into and be a specialist in it. I love remaining an HR generalist consultant, and I like specializing, however, in change. So any network that talks about, the current trends in change management, what businesses need to do to stay up to date and to nurture their people, I'm on it. So, mainly through the CIPD and, discussions such as this. If I meet other professionals, we set up our own networks and then we discuss things and bring it back in ways that are hopefully to benefit wherever we're working and even our home lives, because we have to navigate through still being an immigrant on the outside of work.
Okay. Vanessa? How do you stay up to date with industry trends and developments, and what resources have you found to be most helpful in your career? And yes, I still have plans of opening Science Magazine and you're undercover.
One day, one day. What do I do? So I mainly attend conferences. So through my my job, where we have actually we're required to attend at least one conference to stay current with the science in the fields. I run review meetings, scientific review meetings for a living. So, and it's outside of the field that I trained in. So I have to keep current with the trends in the field that I'm working in. So I go to a lot of conferences. I do a lot of reading of scientific journals as they relate to the work I'm doing now. But I also do networking. There's some science networking groups, particularly for scientists of color. So in terms of keeping informed about the trends, but also other, potential job opportunities out there. And we have actually recently had a networking presentation, a networking session where there was a presentation on just the benefits that are available to us as scientists in general and as minorities, quote unquote, in this space that we should pay attention to. So, the networking part, as Ingrid mentioned, is really key in terms of advancement or even just staying current, for the field.
So, what role did mentorship play for you, Vanessa, in your career development as an immigrant, and how did you find mentors who can support you?
Mentorship was key, and I know that because I didn't have really good ones. In mine, I was like, oh, this is what a mentor's supposed to do? Okay. So I was essentially an employee. My mentor, quote unquote, I saved one, treated me like a pair of hands in the lab. There was clear distinction between the mentoring that other students, non-brown students in the lab got, and particularly the male ones. Oh my gosh. We're talking about, race is one thing, gender, oh my gosh, whole different conversation. But yeah, so when I, probably when I was doing my master's degree, talking to people about, when they're undergrad, their mentor do this and that, and their mentor is currently doing this. That is when I realized what a mentor in this space was supposed to do for you is not, just doing experiments to do experiments. They're supposed to be invested in your career and exposing you to the type of experiments that would get you there, or the type of projects, I should say, that would get you there, or whatever outside of the lab that would give you the exposure to kind of beef up your resume or beef up your experience in general, so that you could determine, okay, this is what I think I want to do, expose you to it so you can have some kind of feel for it. And okay, well, this is still what I want to do, or maybe not. It wasn't until I got to my PhD where I had a mentor, and that mentor was not even my PhD thesis mentor. It was somebody who was on my committee. And she said, okay, you are not getting coffees and brownies anymore when these speakers come in. That is not your job. Mm-hmm. Because they would look around the room, and I was, again, as Ingrid said, I would be the one, right? Oh, Vanessa, could you go get the brownies? Because after the seminar, there would be a little meet and greet with the speaker. And every time I was the one getting the brownies. And she said, you are not, Dr. Marian Murray, you are not getting these anymore. That is not your job. So they would look around and ask for the brownies, and I would look like, okay, somebody gonna get these brownies because I am not getting them anymore. And not just that aspect, but in terms of the science, this is where you want to go. This is what you need to do. This is what you're interested or not interested in. Try out this conference. What about this thing? Read these papers. That is when I got mentored. And that was, 10 years later from the distance between when I came to the country and when I did my PhD.
Was Dr. Murray the person who made black cake for your thesis defense?
No. No, she was not. Oh, wait, no, she was. She was. And this is we're laughing. This is a very white, very American, older lady.
And the case very trendy.
Yes.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, she was. Oh my gosh, look, I forgot about that.
So, how did you find a Dr. Marian, and how did you find someone who could support you?
That is the key point. So I decided I needed to talk to somebody about what was going on. She was one of the few female faculty in the department. And this is even actually I think she was on my thesis committee at that time. But anyway, I started this conversation with her before she was even on my committee to say, look, this is what I've been experiencing from the other guys the guys in the department. You know, I would say we would have these lab meetings and I would say to, let us call him Fred. I would say to Fred, oh, I have this great idea for an experiment. And Fred would say, oh, that doesn't make any sense to us. And so I would not say anything. But Fred would say to the meeting, oh, I have this great idea. And the idea that he would say was mine. And so it was enough. And I said to Marian, Dr. Murray, I said, you know, this is what has been happening. It's been happening for quite a while. And she's like, why didn't you talk to me before? We could, you know. And so she would say, this is what you do. This is what you don't do. And so I would not feel, what we need to do, I think, as women and as immigrants, is to understand that we are sensible, intelligent people. Didn't need to field my ideas past them to get their approval of what I was saying. I should have just had the self-confidence to say, this was my idea. And so I went to her and said, I had to be vulnerable enough or comfortable being vulnerable to say, I am having some problems. And as one of the few female faculty members, I felt comfortable discussing it at that level, woman to woman type of thing. And then we had conversations about, immigrant, brown, black, I should say, not brown. Here you're black, not brown. Those conversations, I had those conversations with her as well. But taking that step to say, okay, I have to reach out and have somebody, talk to somebody about this because I need some help navigating this space. That is the key thing, to appreciate that one needs to make oneself vulnerable in order to get this help. And you might talk to a few people and they might not take you seriously or not champion your cause, but somebody eventually will.
Okay. So Ingrid, what role did mentorship play in your career development as an immigrant? How did you find mentors who could support you? And what advice would you give to an immigrant woman who is struggling to find their footing?
So like Vanessa said, I think, I had one mentor, and let me tell you how. And yes, you asked. It was, so in the NHS as an employee, there's a scheme where there is a Black network of leaders, and it's called a leadership program. And I was like, when I found this thing, I was like, oh my, I have struck joy. And this, I'm talking, Troy's 22, so maybe 24, maybe when I first joined. And I was like, right, that's the direction I want to go. So I need to be mentored from this person. I don't care what my job is. Da, da, da. But of course, in the NHS, it's all very well, you have to be a certain this and a certain that. Anywho, I still tried. I was like, well, I need to get in there, and I'll still try. Fast forward to that. Let me put this very bluntly. Reaching out to those Black mentors was really unsuccessful and painful. What I found was that the Black leaders in the NHS, I can't speak, I haven't worked in any other organization outside of the NHS in the United Kingdom. They were really skeptical about bringing each other up. They wanted to bring those up where not a lot of work had to be done, is what I found later on. So anywho, I stumbled on my mentor through landing a role where I was the human resources advisor at the time. And I ended up reporting to the director because the organization was going through a change process. So if someone had left, like, for example, the human resource business partner or manager at that time, they weren't replacing them. And due to funds and it changed leadership, it took a while. So I was reporting to the director, which is about 3 layers above me. And he was the best. This, unfortunately, was a white middle-aged man. But what he did was, at the time, I was working in London. He lived in Cambridge. I was working in London, but he couldn't be bothered to come into London too many times. So he used to say, Ingrid, we tag team on this, and it'll be great for you. But it really was for him. But I was seeing it all about me. So a lot of times he would throw me into board meetings, but with a lot of prep. And he would be telling me, Ingrid, you got this. You can do it. These people, you probably can talk better than them anyway. They don't even know what they're talking about. We will prep. You will attend that meeting. And I was like, are you sure this is going to work? After the first one, I was hungry. I was like, listen, Paul, we can do this. And especially the other part of that was in the NHS, the way you move up in the NHS is you're supposed to go band A, B, C, then point one of A, then da, da, da. So they keep the immigrants through that scheme of rise. Others skip bands, go into this job, come in from there, go in through there, and land it. So that form of mentorship was by accident. I relished every word, every opportunity to sit in those board meetings. I made feverish notes like I would, like going on. It was mad. And then I asked him to properly coach me because he was, whilst it started off as a, yeah, let me put you in there. Then he said, all right, cool. Because I said, I really need. And you know what my need was at the time? I was a single parent now. And I really needed the bigger funds to be able to reach my goals. I wanted that house. I wanted my own car. I didn't want to be leasing nothing, And so I spoke to him. So just as Vanessa said, I had to put myself out there, say what I am experiencing, give him where I wanted to go, and let the rest of it happen. And it happened. And from then, it really propelled me to next level and no turning back. Still though, always wanting to see if I reached out to those mentors who are listed as mentors, how they would receive me. It was still very difficult. And then when I got one, it wasn't what I thought it would be. And from that, in my roles as a leader, I have always mentored people in the correct manner, to the point where I now have people I've mentored who have bigger job titles and bigger, than me. And it just makes me smile. I am so happy for them, so proud of them. And because they always do come back and say, if you hadn't, I couldn't. Mm-hmm. And what advice I'd give to an immigrant? Don't look for what might be of the obvious mentor. Your mentorship could come from wherever. Listen, think about what you need. Don't think about what they're going to give you as much, but rather what you need. And seek that person out until you find them. And don't stop. If you feel that you have someone who isn't working for you, move on. Because you'll eventually, and then what you might do is figure it out yourself, or you will find that space where somebody will be happy to be that lead, to be that guide, and you will succeed.
Thank you. So Vanessa, what advice would you give to other immigrant women who are struggling to find their footing in their new country and to build a successful career?
I think two things. Networking is key. Once you realize what you want to do, or you have it already in mind what you want to do, networking to get the resources or to educate yourself about how to get there, I think is key. The other thing is not being afraid to stumble, right? Or to get there incrementally. So, I want to get here. And although I can see that the path from here to there is a linear, uncomplicated one for everybody else, not being afraid to take steps. We might need to take, a segue, do it from a tangential approach. But once we have the end goal in mind, it doesn't matter how we get there. And for me, had I known that starting off, I would have gotten to where I wanted to be much sooner. Much, much sooner. So networking, doing research about, what are the requirements for the end goal, networking to build a community of people at least, or at minimum, a group of people where you could get the information about how to get there, and then doing due diligence to get there, even though it might be a circuitous path, keeping that in mind and not being afraid of the stumbles or the setbacks.
So, what final words would you have for our first and second generation immigrants who are within career transition in their various new lands that are not the lands of their birth, etc.? What final words would you have for them? Vanessa, you can go first.
Oh, me? Okay. I'll tell you. What do I say? Do not lose sight of where we come from, or we came from, right? Even if the goal is to settle wherever we end up, whatever country we end up, or it is to go back to the country we came from, never lose sight of that gift of everything that from the island or the country or wherever we came that made us who we are. And I actually equipped us with the resilience to get to this point, right? To leave a country where you're comfortable, to come, and know the culture and known and appreciate it as a person, and to leave to go to another country where you're seen as other. And that seems to be often what the situation is. But never losing sight of who we are and what the cultural richness that we bring to where we are in every situation that we bless with our input.
And Ingrid, what final words would you have?
I just wholeheartedly agree with that. I don't even know if I have anything to add except and always be your authentic self. I think, yes, you can try and fit in and modify and read the room to fit in. But again, and it comes back to what Vanessa said, as long as you know where you're from and who you are, and you keep your goal in mind, success will be yours. As long as you seek it out, don't wait for anybody or anything to give it to you. That's the other thing. If you want it, go ahead, go get it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for your participation in this series.